Hey guys, welcome back to Dorkforge. My name's Paul. On this entry in the feats tier list series, we're going to be taking a look at the feats presented to us in Dragonlance, specifically Shadow of the Dragon Queen. So let's crack on into it, and we're going to break these down so that we do them basically in the trees that they establish. So we're going to be starting off first with Divinely Favored, which is entirely separate. It doesn't link into any of the feats, it's just on its own. And for that, so just a quick thing with all of these feats, they do have the prerequisite of being in a Dragonlance campaign. So this is meant to represent the power and the experience that you accrue living through a war like the War of the Lance. So these feats are only applicable if you're playing in a Dragonlance campaign or your DM explicitly gives you permission to take them otherwise. In terms of power, I don't see why any of them would be banned from a general game, although I personally don't think the game needs more spellcasting feats right now. The martial feats at the very least would be a very solid addition to the game. So cracking on with the Divinely Favoured, it also has the prerequisite of being 4th level. It allows you to learn one cantrip of your choice from the cleric spell list. You also learn Augury, and then based on your alignment you get a 1st level spell you can cast once per long rest. If you choose evil, you get a warlock spell, good you get a cleric spell, and neutral you get a druid spell. Now the mental stat associated that for your spellcasting is going to be what whatever your choice is, so intelligence, wisdom or charisma. You choose when you get the feat. And in addition, you can use a holy symbol as a spellcasting focus for any spell you cast with the ability score you choose for these spells. So let's say that you're a sorcerer and you take this feat and you choose charisma. You can then use a holy symbol for all of your sorcerer spells as well. So that's a very niche benefit. It's nice, it's flavorful, but it's very much a ribbon ability. Augury, it's basically a yes-no divination, but it's a bit wishy-washy, very dependent on the campaign and the DM you have and the kind of questions you ask. So I don't really rate divination really highly in general, just because it can vary in effectiveness so greatly. Getting a cantrip of your choice from the cleric list is pretty good. You can get guidance, toll the dead, some good options there. Light, but perfectly good utility, or mending. And then a 1st level spell where you can have something like Cure Wounds, Healing Word, you could Bless, Armor of Agathis, Hex. Any of those are all very solid choices, and you would be able to cast them with spell slots if you have any as well. So this is effectively just adding on to your class spell list. This is, in terms of power, Augury does complicate things a little bit. Getting a cantrip, the cleric spell list is not the best spell list for cantrips, but it's pretty good. And then basically being able to choose between 3 different spell lists for your 1st level spell is pretty solid. I'm not entirely sure that this is, you need to be 4th level or higher powerful. It's not like it's giving you access to 2nd level spells beyond Augury, which, I mean, it's Augury, but I guess the fact that Augury's 2nd level is why. I'm going to put this squarely in B. It is, I think, kind of the definition of mid, unless you can really extort value out of Augury or you have something really particular in mind. This is a very flavorful feat if you want to add a little bit of divine something something to your character, but it's not something I would particularly advocate for. Next we have Initiative High Sorcery. This has the prerequisites of being a sorcerer or wizard or have the Mage of High Sorcery background. That is a background that comes with Shadow of the Dragon Queen that allows you to take this feat for free. I'm not going to evaluate this in that context. I tend to evaluate things as, is this worth an ASI or a custom lineage variant human, that kind of thing. So you have to choose one of the 3 moons here. They are Nuitari, Lunitari or Solinari. If you choose Nuitari, then you can choose a 1st level spell from the following list. You get to pick 2 of them. Dissonant Whispers, False Life, Hex or Ray of Sickness. Lunatari lets you pick 2 from Color Spray, Disguise Self, Featherfall, and Longstrider. And Solinari lets you choose from Comprehend Languages, Detect good, Evil and Good, and Protection from Evil and Good, and Shield. So you can cast the spells you get from this once per long rest for free. You can cast them with any spells you have, and the spellcasting ability is your choice, basically, in Wiz or Charisma. So this is potentially very powerful just because it gives you a wide access to a lot of different things. Now this is the beginning of a feat tree. The Initiative High Sorcery does dictate what kind of adept feat you can take. So the moon does matter. In terms of what moons separately are good, they all have their value. The value of Solinari is primarily shield, unless you're in a campaign that you're going to get a lot of value from protection from evil and good. Lunatari, Longstrider and Featherfall, not bad, but I would probably go Disguise Self and Longstrider personally. Nuatari is easily the strongest, with False Life and Hex being excellent picks, but Dissonant Whispers can be also very effective in a particular party. This being restricted in the way that it is, I'm not super fond of. You're getting 2 first level spells, which could be potentially powerful, and getting Shield is nice, but you're most likely going to be a Wizard or Sorcerer anyway, so that's a little bit moot. I feel like just like Divinely Favored, this is just kind of hovering and B, middle of the road. Yeah, Shield is good, but the rest of the list is kind of eh. There's no moon that really stands out as great, and whilst yes, you could have first level spells, you could also take something like Fey Touched or Shadow Touched and get a lot more value out of it. So I think, squarely in B is where that belongs. Now moving on to the feats that enables. All of the adept feats that we're going to talk about have a prerequisite of 4th level, and you need to have a certain moon chosen from the Initiative High Sorcery feat to take them. For the Adept of the Black Robes, you need to have taken the Nuatari moon. So that was the moon with... Nuatari was Dissonant Whispers, False Life, Hex, Rave Sickness. And every one of these feats is going to give you 2 abilities. The first one is going to be Ambitious Magic. You get a 2nd level spell of your choice from the Enchantment or Necromancy School of Magic. You can cast it once per long rest without needing a slot. You can do it with spell slots if you have them, and the spellcasting ability is whatever you chose for Initiative High Sorcery. And then you get Life Channel. You can channel your life force into the power of your magic when a creature you can see within 60 feet of you fails a saving throw against a spell that deals damage that you cast. You can expend a number of hit dice equal to the level of the spell, roll them, add them together, and then add that damage to what they take. So this is potentially kind of like spellcasting smites, however it's only going to be on damaging spells that are saving throw based. You can't use it on attack spells for some reason. It's going to eat your hit dice, and very importantly, it's not going to allow you to add your con mod onto those hit dice. It's literally just the roll. You're most likely going to have a d6, maybe a d8 hit dice if you're taking this feat. It's entirely possible you might have something like a d10. That is certainly something, but just it's more likely that a character taking this will have a d6 or a d8. I don't think Life Channel is really worth it as a feature. It's not really going to be adding a lot of damage. That damage is going to be very swingy. And of course, if you're spending your hit dice on damage, then you're not going to have that available to then heal yourself on a short rest, and that can put you in a pickle very quickly. Especially if you're playing in a rough and tumble, warlike setting that Dragonlance is meant to be. So I'm going to throw this in a solid C. The fact that you need a feat to get there, and you need to be 4th level or higher, does make this a little bit of a stretch in terms of taking this feat. And then the fact that you're restricted to Enchantment or Necromancy, and then Life Channel is kind of meh. It's just not doing it for me. Adept of the Red Robes limits you to the Lunatari option from the Initiative High Sorcery. which was Color Spray, Disguise Self, Featherfall, and Longstrider. That's going to give you a 2nd level spell of your choice from either Illusion or Transmutation. And this gives you the ability Magical Balance. When you make an attack or ability check, and you roll a 9 or lower on the d20, you can balance it and treat it as a 10. You can balance it a number of times in this manner equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. So this is kind of like a more limited, different version of Reliable Talent from the Rogue. And just being able to set yourself at a flat 10, but being able to do so after you roll, is a fantastic ability. Illusion, Transmutation, they're not bad schools of magic to choose from, but Magical Balance alone, especially since it's going to scale with your proficiency bonus, is a very, very good ability. Now, just bear in mind that it's not going to apply to saving throws, but ability checks and attacks can very much be worth it on their own, especially if you have something like hard-hitting like Guiding Bolt that's also going to throw advantage on if you hit, so you can kind of make this kind of snowball effect of accuracy. I'm going to put... I think Magical Balance is powerful enough and the scaling is decent enough that this just peaks a low A in the context of these feats. You do still need Initiate High Sorcery, 2 feats is expensive, but Magical Balance, very nice. And finally, for the spellcasting, we have Adept of the White Robes. This is going to give you, this is the Solinari Moon, which, just as a reminder, was Comprehend Languages, Detect Evil and Good, Protection from Evil and Good, and Shield. And this is going to let you choose a 2nd level spell from Abjuration or Divination, and it gives you the Protective Ward ability. When you or a creature you can see within 30 feet takes damage, you can use your reaction to expend a spell slot, and roll a number of d6s equal to the level of the spell slot expended, and reduce the damage that takes by a total of those dice plus your spellcasting ability modifier. So, if an ally gets hit and you spend a 2nd level spell slot, you do 2d6 plus whatever your spellcasting modifier is. And that's the spellcasting modifier as set by these feat trees, not necessarily your spellcasting modifier from your class, unless you've made them the same, which you really should. So, Protective Ward is a good ability. 30 feet isn't a lot of range, and you do need to see them, but it's long enough that realistically that you can probably get a lot of use of it. It does apply to you as well. It's not using your hit dice, which is nice, but it is using your spell slots, and it's only a d6 per. It is damage reduction, which can be very nice, especially if you or the other person is concentrating, or they have another version of damage reduction. Say if you have a barbarian that's raging and they have resistance, and you can throw this damage reduction on top, you can basically obliterate the damage they take. I'm going to put this as... I'm going to put this as a low B. I like Protective Ward, I do. But realistically, you are a spellcaster. Like, in order to actually use this ability, you have to have spell slots from somewhere. It doesn't allow you burn uses of spellcasting from feats that you've taken, which you really should, because you've got a bunch of spellcasting from this feat tree. And cannibalizing your own spell slots for stuff like this, when you could instead be casting spells, is kind of iffy. Now, realistically, it's going to be best on a class that doesn't have a great use for, say, 1st level spell slots, or maybe like 2nd level spell slots are kind of dead to them, like a bard. Plenty of times you can see a bard that once they start moving up in levels, their 2nd level spell slots kind of stagnate. Maybe they're throwing out a shadow, but a lot of the time 2nd level tends to get neglected as they kind of swap their spells around. But just because of how cannibalizing your own spell slots feels really bad and stops you casting spells, this does not warrant going as high as it could have gone. Now, moving into the martial side of things, where the Initiative High Sorcery was the beginning of our feat tree, this time it is the Squire of Solemnia feat, which you need to be a fighter or paladin, or you need to have the Knight of Solemnia background, which would give you the feat. So this is going to give you a couple of benefits. The first is that mount up, when you are mounting or dismounting, that only costs you 5 feet of movement. So it's really leaning into the whole knight in shining armor, mounted combat thing a little bit. And it's going to give you precise strike. Once per turn, when you make a weapon attack roll against a creature, you can give the attack advantage, and if it hits, you can roll a d8 and add that to the damage. You can use that a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus per long rest. This so kind of sets the pace. A lot of the, or all of them really, all of the knight feats and squire feat are basically going to give you kind of reworked versions of Battlemaster maneuvers, but they are not explicitly Battlemaster maneuvers, and they're not using superiority die. So if you were a Battlemaster, you would have your pool of superiority die, and you would have your maneuvers, and then you could also take this feat and have this version of a maneuver, and you could kind of use multiple maneuvers, quote unquote, on an attack, because this is a named feature, not a maneuver, which is kind of nice, I think. Like you could use this on Precision Strike to make sure like Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter hits, and then you get the extra d8 damage. It's going to scale with your proficiency bonus, which is nice. Unfortunately, the damage die doesn't scale, but it starts off as a d8, which is pretty decent. So I'm going to throw this. Ooh. I'm going to put this in A. So the mount up part of it is going to be very niche. However, paladins exist. Paladins have fine steed. And so I think that that is a tangible benefit that you could use in certain circumstances. But Precise Strike is a very good feature. And the fact that this then opens up other avenues to get even more. I'm sorry if you can hear that jingle in the background. The ice cream van has arrived. But the fact that this opens up avenues to give you even more versatility and options as a martial class is pretty great in my opinion. Now, if mount up would need to have significantly more value, or this would need to be a half feat for this to be an S, but this, I think Precise Strike is more than good enough to warrant an A. Moving on into Knight of the Crown. This is a half feat, and it's going to allow you to boost your Strength, Dex, or Con by +1, and it's going to give you Commanding Rally. As a bonus action, you can command one ally within 30 feet of yourself to attack. If the ally can see or hear you, they can immediately make one weapon attack as a reaction. If it hits, they can add a d8 to the damage. They can do this a number of times per proficiency bonus per long rest. This is a vastly improved version of the maneuver, which might be like Commander's Strike or something like that, because the maneuver requires you to both spend a bonus action and sacrifice one of your own attacks, which is awful design, seeing as you're also using a resource for this. So this is basically just a fixed version of it. It's only requiring their reaction, your bonus action, and a use of the feat. It's a half feat, and it is all physical, so this is going to be exceedingly easy to fit into your progression. Whereas the value of Commanding Rally is entirely dependent on your party composition. If you have a rogue, then getting that off-turn sneak attack, very valuable. If you have a barbarian that's raging, getting that off-turn rage bonus, valuable. Paladins that want to smite, valuable. However, you might just be getting like a bog standard d8 plus modifier. So this could have been an S. Could have been an S. But because it is so dependent on your party members for the actual value of that attack, I can't, in any good conscience, put it that high. But this is a good example of kind of a, War Master kind of ability where you can really take charge. Moving on to Knight of the Rose. This is also a half feat. This is going to let you boost your Con, Wisdom, or Charisma by +1. That's going to give you Bolstering Rally. This is a bonus action that affects one creature within 30 feet of yourself or yourself that can see or hear you. You or the target, whoever you choose, gains temporary hit points equal to a d8 plus your proficiency bonus plus the modifier you increased with this feat. And again, proficiency bonus times per long rest. So we're getting another half feat. Now, Constitution is still in play, but Wisdom and Charisma is the other stats that we can bump. So this is getting a little harder to work into our progression for a lot of builds. Still perfectly valid for some. It's looking at the martial side of things. You know, Paladins are going to want Charisma. There's everybody's going to want Wisdom to some degree. But also, I think Constitution would be the way to go unless you have something like Spellcasting or the Aura, or you've invested in skills and Charisma. I think Constitution is really the way to go there. In terms of the temporary hit points, D8's on average 4.5. This is, you get this from 4th level or higher, so let's just say your proficiency is going to be 3, and let's assume that your modifier for it's going to be 2, so you're looking at realistically 10 or higher. That's a non-trivial amount of temp HP to give out at a time. You could do this just repeatedly and give this to multiple people at the same time. And you can do this out of combat. Because it doesn't specify how long the temporary hit points last, it will just last until you take a long rest. So this is a really great little way to bolster the party. I'm not super thrilled about the ASIs involved, and that is kind of holding it back, just because having a really good modifier is a little bit hard to budget in for a lot of builds for Bolstering Rally. And for that reason, I'm going to put this low A. You might be thinking, why? You're putting a lot of these very highly. Yes, it's because they're very easy to fit into a Marshal's progression and very good. You might say that, hey, the spellcasting from the other things might be worth more than the ability in Squire or the Knight feats we've cut so far. Yes, but you can use these more, and they're also bolstering your ASIs, your stats. So that's why they're going higher. And finally, we have Knight of the Sword. This is an ASI that's going to let you boost your Intelligence, Wisdom, or Charisma by +1, and it's going to give you Demoralizing Strike. Once per turn, you hit a creature with a weapon attack roll. You can try to frighten it. They must make a Wisdom saving throw, and that's DC 8 plus proficiency plus whatever ability modifier you increased with this feat. On a failed save, the target's frightened of you until the end of your next turn. On a successful save, the target has disadvantage on the next attack roll it makes before the end of its next turn. And again, proficiency times per long rest. This is very, very good. Now, frightened itself is a very hit and miss, right? There are some creatures that are just entirely immune to frightened, and there are some creatures that just have a high enough modifier or other abilities that actually frightening them will be kind of tough. Or they might have abilities where frightened as a condition is entirely useless. Like if they're a spellcaster and they're happy to maintain range and use saving throw based spells, it's not really helping you. But the fact that this gives you a win on a fail, that it's going to give them disadvantage anyway, means that you're never going to encounter a situation where this might not be potentially helpful. Again, we are running into the issue here where this is a half feat, but now this is solely mental stats that we're boosting. That, the lack of damage, the potential to run into frightened, immune characters. So like if a creature is immune to frightened and they're happy to use saving throw based stuff, then you're not really going to get any benefit from the disadvantage either. So I think this is good enough for a B. I think that the mental stats is kind of holding this back a little bit for most martial builds. Depending what level you're playing at, or if you're playing a fighter, the extra ASIs could go a long way here. But just fitting this in and still like keeping your main attack stat up, it's going to be a little bit difficult. Obviously, if the Squire of Salamnia feat was part of your background, that's easier. But at the same time, these are all 4th level prerequisites, so you couldn't use Variant Human or anything like that to secure them either. I'm going to put this in B, but I will say that it is certainly a high B. This is almost worthy of an A. I really like the design, how it still gives you something if they succeed. But realistically, I don't think it's quite on the same tier as all of these. But that's what I think. Do you think that I got these right, wrong? Was I too harsh on some of them? Let me know in the comment section down below. And whilst you're down there, if you got to this point in the video, you probably like hearing me talk. So why don't you smack that like and subscribe button, just so that you can, stay around and see more content in the future. Until next time, I've been Paul, and I will see you at the Forge.